Hi everyone. Today I'm doing a care guide video on the Halmahera Indonesian blue-tongued skink. And this is Blue here. He's going to be our little representative of the species today. He's an animal ambassador at VIA Aquarium, where he's used for hands-on presentations with guests that come in for little shows. And today we're going to talk about a really cool reptile species from Southeast Asia. In this video, we're going to cover enclosures, heating and humidity, diet, health and handling for the Halmahera Indonesian blue-tongued skinks. This video is just going to be very specific to this subspecies you find in Southeast Asia and not covering the other island species like Key Island and Iranian or Maruki blue-tongued skinks. And we'll go over a little bit about that in the video. So this is just a care guide I have worked on for a little over a year taking care of this animal, and it's just specific to the species compared to some other care guide videos. We'll kind of cover a little bit of a broader scale of animals you find in the reptile hobby. Now for an enclosure, you want to start off with something like a 40-gallon breeder tank, and that's because these guys are terrestrial, very low to the ground. They're not arboreal or spend their times in trees. You can see he has these very, very little legs, and he is not moving around too much. He's actually, these guys slide on their belly. So they just kind of kick their legs back up and they just slither around almost like a snake. The island they come from, the Halmahera Island, is a very dense rainforest, which has trees, of course, but those are going to be spent most of the time for arboreal species of reptiles and birds. These guys are low to the ground. They're an opportunistic eater, so they're foraging around on the ground floor looking for insects, small fruits, vegetation that they can forage on and eat, and that's what they're going to spend most of the day doing. And then other than that, they're just going to be sitting there and laying flat. They're not as active as compared to a monitor lizard or a bearded dragon that's going to use its horizontal and vertical space to move around. They're usually, I see this guy just sitting on a rock for a couple minutes, and then he goes back and sleeps and is under his little cave, and then he goes back out again, forages around and digs a little bit, and just rinse and repeat over and over again. Even in the wild, they're not going to be as active because they have these short legs, so they can't do a lot of moving around because they get tired easily. So you want to give them enough surface area that they can move around and have enough space to stretch their bodies out. When they're a full adult, they're going to get about 20 inches head to tail. They're not as big as the Australian blue-tongued skinks that get a little bit more girth and length to them, almost 3 feet. They're going to stay short, a little bit under 24 inches or almost 2 feet in length. A male and a female, it doesn't really matter what gender it is. A 40 breeder tank and larger that has enough horizontal space to give them to move around if needed be, if they wanted to forage and have some enrichment. With heat and humidity, these guys come from a tropical rainforest in the Indo-Pacific, so it's very hot and humid. Their humidity is around 80% to 100%, and the temperature they need is around 90 degrees on a warm day. What I use for this species, I use under the tank heaters to kind of keep him in a warm side, and also plays with the humidity because I leave a little cave for him where you can get all that moisture, and the humidity being in the substrate starts to increase with that temperature on that one side. The cool side gets no lower than 70 degrees. I keep a smaller heat pad right under the tank that gets around 78 to 80 degrees. And then on his warm side, it's close to 95 to 96 degrees in temperature. And he has his little microclimates where you can go from the hot to the cool side. Since they don't move around too often, you want to be careful that the temperature doesn't overheat the animal and cause a lot of health problems. With his cousins in the outbacks of Australia, they can just walk out to a nice warm rock, and there's a lot of open surface area and space where they can absorb heat. These guys, they have to move around a little bit more often, so you want to make sure that once they have their warm spot, they're not just getting stuck to it because they're worried about moving to another area. If you look, I'll try to gently flip him over on his belly. You can see that dark black with the white speckling on it, and that is an indication when you see that with species of reptiles that have dark colorations around the belly or the back of them like this. It just shows them that they are trying as much as possible to absorb heat from the sun, and that dark coloration is going to help him absorb a lot of heat when he finds a little pocket in the jungle where there's not a lot of brush that's going to block the sunlight to come in. With the temperature, you want to have a temperature thermostat connected, and you can get those online or at the pet store. With the humidity, you want to have a little thermostat or humidity gauge inside the enclosure, or you can buy at the hardware store a little humidity gauge, and you can get the air humidity and just test it out. They're not expensive, and they're convenient to have. Also, a little heat ray gun you can pointly direct with the laser where the temperature is around the microclimate of his enclosure. So like we were talking about before on the enclosure, you don't want to be too high because he's not going to get the heat from above, like on a high rock next to a heat lamp. He's going to get it right below. So he wants those little pockets of heat and moisture. With the substrate, you want it to have about almost knuckle deep or about 2 inches in depth. I try to build it up a little bit higher near his hot spot so he's not directly on the glass or getting stuck to the bottom of the tank. So he gets a lot of that moisture on that side, and plus if you add a lot of logging, it holds that moisture inside, especially if you leave a lot of leaf litter. That moisture is going to be pocketed in around the enclosure, so that helps him out. I do a jungle mix of sphagnum peat moss, sphagnum moss, and coconut husk, and that is a great moisture collector. You want to be careful not to super saturate the enclosure. Has an open top screen on the enclosure, so it slowly evaporates that moisture, and once I see the substrate is getting dry right on the surface, I just mist it with a little spray bottle, or I pour cups of water all around the enclosure just to saturate that substrate again, so it's not getting too dry. If you oversaturate something, you can lead to mold or fungus growing, and it also can lead to scale rot on a tropical species like this. So you want to be careful not oversaturating the substrate or make a false bottom where that substrate of the water can evaporate and it's not holding the substrate too long and causing health problems. You want to be careful too, not getting too dry or too oversaturated with the moisture or humidity. It can lead to respiratory issues with reptiles, so you want to be careful with that. So you want to just keep an eye on it with the humidity gauge and the temperature probes. We're going to do something a little bit fun. It's time for dinner for Blue, so we're going to talk about diet now. So what I'm going to have here is a puree of blue tongue skink food I made especially for him. Their diet in the wild is 50% vegetation, 40% protein, and 10% fruit. Of course, that's going to fluctuate with the season, what is available in their environment, but in captivity, you can control it a little bit better. Look, food. There you go, buddy. And I do a puree. Funny enough, they will pick up the tasty parts of their meal. So I used to do shredded collard greens as a staple green, blueberries chopped up, and cockroaches, and I realized he would eat all the tasty stuff food first, and then he leaves the collard green last, or don't even bother eating it. So doing a puree mix for your blue tongue skink, it gets all his nutrition he needs in one setting. Now for the diet, it's a little bit hard. Studying and researching about Indonesian blue tongue skinks, I only seen that they just do a pile of food on a bowl and that's it, but never a body percentage. And I try to do that with our animals so they're not overeating and having health problems, especially with being overweight, since they're not as active as a diurnal species of lizard like a bearded dragon, where they're going to be moving around. They can burn those calories and they're not sitting around like this little couch potato. You want to make sure you're giving the right amount per their body amount. So what I do, about 17 to 20% of their body weight 3 times a week. He only gets 3 feedings once a week. That's all he gets. So I spread it out so he can break down the food, and he has a normal bowel movement every other day after a feeding. So that just controls his diet and reduces the chance of getting super chunky. I've seen some really fat blue tongue skinks, and that's because they're just getting a lot of cat food and vegetables and fruits all day, and they're not getting a controlled diet, and they just get really fat, and then they don't lose their legs, and then pretty much you just have a snake in your house, and you should have just bought a snake at that point. So as you can see, this is about 20% of his body right here, and then this is what he's gonna get for the rest of the week. Next week he'll start his feeding schedule with their diet as well. You want to make sure they get enough vitamins and calcium. Of course, being in a dense forest, you're not going to get a lot of vitamin D from the sun, so you want to give him the vitamin D, especially in captivity, since he's not outdoors getting direct sunlight. He's going to get synthetic sunlight from a UVB bulb, which is only about 5.0 UVB. Since they're a tropical species, they're not getting that high spectrum of sunlight, so that's something you have to look at into. So once a week he gets a calcium and vitamin dusting of his food. You don't want to overdo the calcium, especially from the 3 feedings, because you can overcalcify your animal or over vitamin, just like with people. They're not going to absorb it because it's just going to run through their system, or it can cause stress to their GI tract, so you want to be careful with that. So he's just going to eat this today. So his vitamins and calcium is usually given earlier in the week during his first feeding. And when they're babies and juveniles getting into their first year, it's okay to give 2 feedings a day, and that's because the animal is growing. When he first came in, or sorry, she came in, she was only about 7 inches, and then it grew almost over a foot right now after a full year. They do have a fast growth spurt, so you want to make sure they get enough food, especially that protein from insects, in their diet. So you can do cockroaches, earthworms, and blend them in with their collard greens and staple greens like mustard greens or butternut squash in their diet. And then a little bit of fruit, so I cut up a little bit of blueberries or pieces of banana just to sweeten it up for him, so he's a little bit interested in getting his food. Right now he's a little bit shy in front of the camera, but usually he's chowing down food, so he's just gonna lick it up now while I talk. So this is gonna keep him distracted for a little bit. Okay, we're gonna talk about health and handling with the blue-tongued skink right here. Now with handling, you can see I'm just using my flat hands, and he's wiggling around. He's not stressed out. When these animals are extremely stressed out, how they get the name blue-tongued skink is because, of course, they have the blue tongue, but it's used for mimicry, and that's because they're pretending to be a venomous or poisonous animal in their environment. They actually will hold their mouth open and flick their tongue out to keep away predators. If that doesn't work, they actually will drop their tails, so you have to be careful with that. You never want to grab them at the base of their tail or anywhere near the lower region, so you're not stressing them out and making them worried that they're going to be hunted by a larger predator. If you were worried about, you can see the little nails right here, they're kind of scratching up my hands. They're hard, you can't cut their nails. You have to use like a rough rock for them in their enclosure, and they'll slowly trim down the nails, and you want to make sure that it's not too rough like sandpaper that it starts to scratch their belly when they're walking around it. So you have to be careful with that, especially if you're letting younger people or children holding these guys. It's better just to use gloves if you're not comfortable with the scratching of the nails. It's almost like if you had a parakeet or a cat scratching all over your arms and hands. It gets a little bit uncomfortable, especially when he tries to climb up my shirt and sit on my head when I'm not paying attention. So you want to be just a little bit cautious of that, and especially never trying to reach for their tail because they could drop it off if they feel threatened. And the reason why he's so calm right now, not holding out his mouth, he's a little bit nervous with the camera in front of him right now, but he's not too worried about it. And that's from just handling him every day. So when you first get your animal, slowly just let them acclimate to their environment after a week. And then you can slowly do conditioning with their behavior so they're getting used to being handled. Just try to be gentle with them. You don't want to squeeze them. Just keep your open hand and kind of scoop under them and let them walk on your hand just like this so that they feel okay with just moving around. And it's going to take time. So you just want to start off like maybe just 5 minutes, just holding your animal and just gently putting it back in so it has that positive reinforcement. And then slowly just increase the times from 5 minutes to 20 minutes to an hour to a couple hours until the animal feels fully comfortable being touched. And even just moving your hand gently across his back. They are inquisitive and they like to move around, so even letting them walk around on the ground, just be careful that there's no sharp objects or other pets that can make it nervous and it wants to defend itself and flick his tongue out or drop the tail. So if you give him enough time and space outside his enclosure, he'll start to get, he or she will get comfortable in their environment, which is pretty cool. So I like letting him walk around his enclosure outside or just like on the table right here. So he just starts to feel comfortable. And of course he's gonna not stop moving as I'm doing my video. For the last part of this video, I guess Blue's gonna eat right now, but that's okay. Again, we're gonna talk about the health, which I saved to the end because this is the challenging part with keeping Halmaheras, blue tongue skinks, and that's because most of them are imported from abroad in Southeast Asia. There's a lot of animals at the moment that are becoming more popular in the pet trade in the United States, but they're not captive bred, which is a problem. So this could be potentially a great beginner reptile for the general public that is trying to get into the hobby, but this is going to be more for an experienced keeper, and that is because of all the health problems from being an imported animal or wild caught for some of the species. The reason why I specifically want to talk about the Halmahera Indonesian blue tongue skink is because the other species come from different ecosystems on islands on the chain links between Papua New Guinea to Indonesia, so it would not be doing the animal justice on the care, and those animals are not as popular as the Halmahera for whatever reason, maybe because the populations are a little bit more dense, so there is a little bit more available to field collect or catch from the wild. There are some breeders in the United States are starting to captive breed Halmaheras and some other Southeast Asian animals, which is awesome because there's some really cool species from those islands in that chain link, which is really cool. But this is not a beginner animal for that case. They come in imported with a lot of health problems, either respiratory infections, external and internal parasites. Some, most of the time, don't even survive being shipped, so they end up dying with this box of other lizards. You also take the chance of end up getting maybe an adult female that's gravid or pregnant because they don't lay eggs to give birth to live young, and then you end up with some individuals in captivity here, but at the same time you're not really helping the population because we are not really breeding them as compared to some other species of reptiles that are available in the United States, like ball pythons and bearded dragons. So hopefully in the future, in the next 5 to 10 years, these guys become more available, but as captive bred individuals, we can slowly bring down the importation of Halmaheras. And the reason why I kept going back between, just a side note, between she and he is because these guys only reach about 20 inches. That's how you can sex the gender of an Indonesian blue tongue skink. And usually you have to make a breeding pair, and that's probably a difficult part of why some people are deterred trying to get them, because they don't know if they're buying a male or a female at the beginning. But I think at this point, if they're doing well in captivity for the ones that survived, and we do have long-term captives too, you can find those available, and they're usually treated with parasite medication. They do well, so we should start breeding them more in captivity and not harm the wild population and extirpating them from the islands where they come from. Hopefully in the future I can do other videos on the other Indonesian subspecies you find, like the Marukis or Armenians found in Southeast Asia and going towards Papua New Guinea. That's, you're eating the container. That's not good, buddy. When you get one of these guys, before you even buy them, do your research. Find a breeder or a vendor that knows a full life history as much as possible of this species. Either find someone that and pay the extra money and don't go cheap and get a captive bred individual. If you get a long-term, make sure that they do all the medications and health checks on the animals before they sell them to you. If any of the vendors you find that are being too discreet or not giving you enough full information, don't feel ashamed or uncomfortable to say, no, I'm not going to buy this animal. Don't support that industry just because you're enabling a bad behavior in the hobby, and it doesn't make any of us look good that are trying to take care of these animals and actually learn and appreciate them. So do a lot of research compared to some other animals. If anything that you hear notes of being field collected, wild caught, farm bred, or imported, you're gonna have to do a lot more work, and you're gonna be spending more money on vet bills than even getting the animal or enclosure itself. Farm breeding, I'll go over that a little bit just real quick. It's just when you find either a female that's gravid with eggs or giving birth to live young, they wait for the female to give birth in captivity at a facility, and then they ship off the babies and the adult. Either sometimes they'll release the female back out in the wild, or they'll actually collect eggs and you have captive hatch or captive born individuals. but it's a little bit of a mess being abroad. You don't know exactly the full information unless you are a reptile vendor. Then you can speak to the people that you're getting these animals imported to, but not all that information is given out to the general public, so you just have to be very careful with that. Close-up shot for the ending of this video. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and hopefully this helps you out. If you are a reptile breeder and you are by any chance have Halmaheras, please breed them more. They're really awesome. I think they become a great beginner reptile for people getting into the hobby or for educational experiences. So if you want to check out Blue in the future or see him up close in person, I'm going to put a link on the description for the VIA Aquarium, where we do our little reptile shows. You can check out some other terrestrial animals. Of course, you can check out the fish. We have tons of animals here that are aquatic and on land, like Blue. He's so cute. And I'm also going to put a care guide video on my Instagram page so you guys can check out and compare notes if you by any chance actually have an Indonesian blue tongue skink or a Halmahera specifically. Hopefully the notes can help you guys out or give you some research how to start off with getting the animal in your care. And hopefully you have a good night. I'm getting tired and Blue's getting a little bit full, so hopefully he doesn't poop on me now after eating. I'll see you guys next time.